Okay, again, my name is Joseph. I am one of the organizers of this group. We are the National Mobile Group. We try to follow all things mobile, Android, iOS, Windows Phone sometimes, BlackBerry, anything that deserves talking about. Mostly, honestly, we cover Android because we get sponsorship from Google. But as you'll see today, we got the Coco heads here in with us, and that's something we like to do, periodically, just to keep that going. Our sponsors tonight, BMI for the venue. I'm an employee of BMI, and so is Ed. Ed, okay, he's not gonna, yeah. They graciously give us the venue to meet in. A company called Cool Rice is providing some swag for the panelists, and Google gives us ongoing support, not just really for this meeting, but they usually do. And Texas tonight is providing us with the food. Zach, can you go today?
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to introduce myself real quick. My name is Zach. I represent Texas. I'm here in the Nashville area. Some of you I've already got a chance to know, and some of you I have not. Just wanted to let you guys know that Texas is trying to focus on growing our involvement in the local community here, and we're going to partner with this group further in the future, and hopefully get to know some of you as well. So please tell me if you'd like to thanks.
Okay, and lastly, we are going to rattle off a couple of small things. We're going to do a small thing tonight, so if you want, go to that link right there and enter your information. And I think it just asks for email and your name so that we know you're here, and you'll maybe win something worth $2. It's for people.
Is it an Android phone? Android phone?
No, that's
sorry.
I can't believe you would do that. like when we're trying to build fellowship.
Sorry.
I mean, he's recording.
The raffles are still there at the bottom, and we'll have the raffle on most of the slides tonight, so it's still there if you need it. Looking back, our group over the last 2 months, July 13th, we ran an event in conjunction with Nash.js, Progressive Web Apps. That was sponsored by Google. It was covering a topic that was, I don't know, didn't get a lot of feedback on, but it seemed really cool to me. July 26th, the Dry Principle with Sarah Kleinfelter from Matova. August 26th, I presented on a Flappy Bird clone, Flappy's Revenge, written in Unity. And it's really easy to do that if you haven't written anything in Unity before, but it's pretty simple to write just any little app. September 17th, we participated in the National Mini Maker Fair, and basically our goal was teaching kids or getting kids interested in programming. It was really fun. I dressed up as a Minecraft guy for like 6 grueling, sweaty hours. And they programmed me with individual instructions that they put on magazines, and I had to be a slave. It was, it was grueling, but it was fun. Okay, looking forward to November and December. Okay, we are probably going to have a dev fest this final yet. There's an event in November called November, which is all about Node.js and it's expanded to other JavaScript frameworks, Angular, React, and things like that. But it's a fun event. The day before that, the Saturday before that, we're probably going to have a Google-sponsored Dev Fest talking about Google Cloud offerings, probably some Firebase. And we're still ironing that out and working it out what will be practical to present. In December, we're taking a holiday break because we usually meet the last Tuesday of the month, which would be like Christmas Day, so skipping that one. January, we're probably going to do another Android Study Jam. And that's a series of meetups that goes, in the past, we've gone January through April, doing the basics of Android programming. 2015 we did Android fundamentals, teaching programmers who were pretty good at the programming already to pick up Android. And there are a couple of people in here that did that. And then in 2016, We did Android for beginners, where it was people that had never programmed at all necessarily. So that was kind of an adventure. But because we're teaching logic and the principles of logic and basically what is a string, that kind of thing. But it was it was a nice little series. Okay, in November, December, outside of this group, November 10th and 11th, there's an event called DevOps Days. Does anybody familiar with this event? Know what's going to be happening there? Well, you can look it up, DevOps Days. I don't want to get too in depth to it. It's not at the Adventure Science Center. That's from another copy and paste slide that's not there. So then November 19th is our pre-November Dev Fest that I was talking about. November 20th and 21st is November at Lipscomb and Swang Business Center. Okay, are there any other events that anybody wants to mention? Just and feel free, it's fine.
Just to do a little plug for Cocoa Heads, we have an event tomorrow. If anybody's interested in iOS development, one of our own, Mawson, is going to be presenting on Introduction to Image Processing for iOS. So if you guys are interested in that at all, as a hobby or professionally, come join us. Details are on our meetup group page. So
go to meetup.com.
I think it's like Nashville Cocoa Heads. We're the only Cocoa Heads group in Nashville. It should be easy to find.
If you just search Cocoa Heads Nashville, and you'll find it.
Yeah, that's us.
Anything else? Any announcements other than just events? Mm-hmm. Oh, that was the same day. I would think they would dare to mention it. So there is a conflict. Yeah, we have yet to schedule ours, so maybe not. We'll see. Okay, job seekers. First off, is there anybody here that has a job they're looking to fill? They're looking for somebody.
Yeah.
Go.
I'm looking for two different people that have expertise in the Node stack. Specifically, I'm looking for somebody who can do front-end development with React and Node, and somebody who is comfortable with sort of full-stack development and specifically analytics and data processing. The company that I represent is called Chalkline Sports, and we are in the industry of sports betting. So would love for you to come talk to me.
Okay. Okay. And then if there's anybody here that's a job seeker, said have a talk. Otherwise, if you're looking for something mobile, I get a lot of calls for mobile people, and it's jobs that I can't always take. So, I might be able to hook you up. Seriously, see me if you.
Matova is looking for experienced Android developers. 1 to 2 years probably is good enough. If you know C++ and or the NDK, that is a super plus. So anybody with at least some professional Android experience, that's kind of the ballpark we're looking at. Come talk to me afterwards.
Cool. I guess Lunar Lincoln's always looking for our next crew member. So if you haven't met me yet, come say hello, or Jennifer over here, my co-founder. Love to meet with you. Always on the lookout for really strong developers who are a good fit for us. Lunar Lincoln.
And we'll get back to that in a second. Okay, looking forward. If you want to help with the group, or if you have anything where you think it'd be a great place for us to meet, come see me. We'll talk about that. Okay. Tonight, as you probably all know, we're doing Android versus iOS for Team Android. We have Sean Beach here. Sean, if you would introduce yourself, tell us what you do and where you do it.
Sure. Sean Beach. I work at Matova. I am an Android developer there. And I'm doing this professionally for about 2.5 years. 3 years in February. And I am repping Team Android by myself tonight. So here we go.
It's okay. We need all the help we can get.
Yeah.
Well, of course you do. I know.
And before we go any further on that, I looked around. I did a lot of fishing for extra Android developers that would be willing to contribute tonight, and I didn't get any takers. I was kind of surprised.
Strange. It's almost like they were afraid.
They were afraid, yeah. So if you're here and you're an Android expert, feel free to step up here, and there might be swag for you at the end.
It just wasn't worth that time.
But yeah, your hourly rate in terms of that is really not. So, if you feel like championing, I'm still up there. I don't feel like I think Sean can win it. And Team iOS, represented by Blake Freeman. Blake, introduce yourself. Tell us where you're going to do it.
Yeah. Well, hey guys, my name is Blake. I'm the organizer for Cocoa Heads Nashville. Been the organizer there for about a year. We're a great group, so if you're interested in iOS, you should come join us. Professionally, I'm a senior iOS developer at Black Pixel. It's an agency out of Seattle. We work with clients all over the country and have developers all over the place as well. It's largely a remote company. I've been there for about a month and a half now. Yeah, so that's me.
And joining him is Jonathan Wiley, aka Wiley.
Yes.
Please introduce yourself and tell us all about you.
Sure. Hey everybody, my name's Wiley. I'm the co-founder and lead developer of Lunar Lincoln. My co-founder Jennifer over here. We build mobile apps for iOS and Android. We don't discriminate. Try not to, at least. All of our developers do both. Just work for several companies here in town and a few out of town, and just really love building mobile apps. So I've been at this since the first Android phone launch. I actually started on Android, so you'll get to hear tonight why I switched to the dark side.
At first you're Android, and now you're iOS.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have hard feelings against Android.
No, of course not. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Tonight we've got a series of questions that we've given everybody and told them we're going to ask. But if you'd like to post a question, you can read this. Here's a link on to which you can go and you can write a question. And to get there, if we've got time, then I'll frame the most prominent most prominent questions from the audience. And this is also public on the web, so somebody might pose a question from the web, but I kind of doubt that. Also, questions that pose. Also, there's kind of a surprise behind I haven't done with these guys about 2/3 of the way through, and it's kind of based on what you might put into this form. So if you go on here, there's something you get an answer. Other than just questions.
Furiously looking through the agenda, Joseph. This is concerning.
I was not prepared. This is not what I signed up for.
Can help you in your career. That's good. Okay, so again, let's get to the cage match. There's the referee link, and stay there. And the question poser, whatever link is there. The first question of the night. Format. You're going to be sick basically 3 minutes to respond to each question per team. And there's I don't think we need a timekeeper because frankly it won't take that long to answer every question. And we're probably going to wrap up at 7:30. And in certain cases we'll have a minute of rebuttal if appropriate for the opposing team to determine their answers. Now let's get to it. Okay. Random drawing determined that Android would be the first person to answer the first question. So Sean, can you tell us what is the best thing you've been developing for your platform?
Sure. So best thing in my mind for Android runs on Java. So if you know Java, probably the vast majority of you can code it. It takes a little bit of getting familiar with it, with the SDKs, getting to understand active fragments and all that nonsense. But for the most part, if you know Java, you can do Android. It's very easy to transfer. Java is one of the most well-known languages in the world. So it's a great place to go if you're doing Java web and you want to get into mobile development. Pretty easy transition to go over to Android. And you can just get started without any problems. Open source, if you want to contribute to it, go for it.
Okay, it's a pretty vanilla answer. That's what I would expect. And what do you guys say about iOS? And feel free to either one of you can question both of you.
There's so many things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the reasons, the main reason that I'm an iOS developer, is the culture. Like every language, every has their own language, their own quirks, and the pros and cons and stuff like that. But in my experience, I've not found a development community that has the culture that Cocoa has, that iOS development does. And that's the thing that really drew me to it. I actually did like 3 months of Android development a long time ago, so that doesn't count for much. But that's what I think is the best part for me, is just being able to go around and read the various blog posts and talk to all the people, and plus I love doing Cocoa Heads. So, yeah.
Totally. I think for me, like I really enjoyed that. Apple in general just has such a vertically integrated platform. Like they build everything down to the chipset, all the way up to the SDKs, and we're just building on top of that. So it's really nice to know that when you write something and it runs well on a handful of devices, like that it's going to work well for millions of users, versus like trying to figure out if this is going to work on the thousands of variations of phones that are out there. So that's my favorite part.
Yeah.
When I ship something, I can be super confident that it's going to be really, really good for every user who uses it.
Yeah, personally, as a developer, I've done Android and I've done iOS. For iOS, I like the fact that your QA is done for you. I mean, you don't have to go and run a billion devices. You can go on probably 5 or 6 and get the vast majority of the devices you're going to get. And on Android, that's just not true. You could say you're targeted towards any level of the operating system, and you never know what you're going to hit because there's different chipsets, different amounts of RAM on every device, and it's hard to hit. But the universality of it, the Java aspect, and the fact that basically you can write things that run on Chrome that run on Android. But I mean, it's really easy to write an Android app, I think. Next question, and we'll go to you guys first. Who do you guys see as the typical iOS user? And if that's not clear-cut enough a question, how do you see the typical iOS user as different from the typical Android user?
That's fair. I liked your answer to this. You want to give it? I thought you said it really well.
Okay, so to me, I feel like the typical, the target audience of iOS, if you will, is grandparents, technically inept people, and people who are too busy to worry about their phone working. Like they just want a phone that works. Like that's it. They don't want to fumble with it. They don't want to, install mods or deal with tons of, crazy software quirks because there are 1,000 different devices and it's impossible for developers to optimize for all of them. They just want a device that is easy to use, fun to use, and works the same way every time.
I feel like that's fair. People with style typically.
Yeah, very stylish people.
Stylish grandmothers.
Yeah.
The grandmothers that shop not at Walmart but at Target.
Yeah,
That's right. Yeah,
that's right.
that's right. Target.
Yeah. Typical Android user, I guess I would used to say the same thing as a Windows user. The person who wants to be things all the time, like wants to get their system set up just right. I don't know. I used to be an Android user and I used to love it. Booting my phone and figuring out what the best app to handle each use case was, that was really fun for me. And now I'm really busy, so I liked iPhone better.
Also, people that just don't know any better.
Yeah. It's a good point.
Take it.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with them. iOS is for simple people. If you want something straightforward, you don't want to think, iOS, you got you covered. if you want to, just like Riley said, you want to get a picture of anything at all, Android, because you can't with this. Yeah, I mean, really, geez. Style, come on. What, have you ever seen a red iPhone? I have. I'm fine, but I don't know. So yeah, any like power user type person that wants to tinker with their phone, mess with the operating system, do any sort of rooting, that's where you go for Android. If you want anything to do with development, unless you just have $100 lying around, you can do Android for free. You can't publish for free, just to be clear.
Just like to clarify, not the case anymore.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
That's news. $25 to play.
Fair.
All right, fair. So yeah, power users, anybody that wants to mess around with stuff on their own, Android is definitely easier to get started with. I mean, it technically runs on Linux, so yeah. I mean, if you know your shell, then you can mess with Android stuff. It's probably a little dangerous. Just get in the shell commands and start doing stuff, but hey, you can.
I think it's probably a better comparison to say Linux or Windows versus Mac.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, that's kind of obvious, but you know, just said it.
Well, as an Android developer that uses a Mac every day, I feel like the distinction between Mac users and other platforms are getting kind of blurred these days. But the distinction between Linux and Windows is definitely like Linux is like they would probably.
So, I remember you guys mentioned only the idea that would this point be a much higher price point. Is that not something like that?
I don't think so. I think any comparable Android and iPhone, they're on par with each other for price. Like, I think the Note 7 before it started blowing up, it was about the same price point.
Yeah.
Same thing. I think the Pixel actually comes in a little bit cheaper.
Yeah, the Pixel. So the cheapest Pixel you can get is $599. I
thought it was $650. Okay.
Is it $650?
It's Google's
announced on the 4th. It comes out. Today's the 25th. It comes out later this week.
Isn't that replacing the Nexus?
Yes. The idea is that it replaces the Nexus line, which was their kind of like lower end stuff. That just came with stock Android. The Pixel is actually made by Google, or like the software is made by Google. So HTC made the hardware, and then Google applied their own software layer to it. Kind of like Samsung does, but hopefully not as bad as Samsung's stuff.
But that, yeah.
There's a big difference between the Apple users are a lot more fluid. They're Western basically.
Yes.
The Asia and China, Africa, China are basically all Android. So you have Android knows how to number of something like that.
I feel like that's changing in China, but yeah.
Yeah, that's, I think a large part of that has to do with in developing countries and stuff. There's so many Android devices and they hit so many lower price points that it's just a lot easier to have Android devices there. Yeah.
And Google actually started the Android One program a few years back that is specifically to that. It's low-cost Android devices that are guaranteed to work for at least 2 years. So you can go out and buy a $150, $200 Android phone in India or Indonesia or whatever. And you know that it's going to work, or at least you're going to get operating system updates. Let's be clear. You're going to get guaranteed operating system updates for the next 2 years. So it's definitely something Google has targeted as like, oh, there's a huge market here if we can just tap into it.
And Apple has made it clear that they've never tried to hit the budget market, and they never will. For better or for worse, they just have never tried to do that. So.
Although I would argue that some like 2-year-old iPhones like stack up pretty well against a brand new Android phone at the same price.
Sure.
You also suggested that Android might be more towards the power user who wants to kind of get under the hood and rig their phone, be able to access it that way. Do you feel like traditionally has Android been kind of a Wild West and that's kind of a requirement for you as a user, or do you feel like it's reached the point now where it is a consumer end product that you can, have a good experience with without being really a power user or somebody who kind of knows what they're doing with their phone?
I think that's still somewhat the stigma that it gets. It's not really true. You can open up an Android phone. I mean, my mom is in her 50s and her iPhone broke, and they're like, well, I can't afford another iPhone, so I'm just going to get like a cheap Android Go phone. And she actually said the other day, like, she probably want to go back to iPhone. Whether or not that's due to price or not, I don't know. But she's happy with her Android phone. She hasn't done anything.
It passes the mom test.
Yeah, it passes the mom test. Eventually, she wasn't a big fan at first, but yeah, definitely with the changes to Android operating systems, it's gotten easier as it's gone along. I think back in like the honeycomb and early jelly bean days, that was definitely true. That like you kind of had to know what you were doing from the get go. I don't think that's really the case anymore. I think anyone can pick up an Android phone and pretty well use it to its extent.
Okay, in the interest of time, we're going to move on. And if you have a question to post, and put it on the forum. I think we're going to go back to Sean this time. How long would you say it would take a decent programmer, someone who knows what they're already doing, let's say on Windows or on Linux or whatever, is a decent programmer, to pick up development on Android, like to start from the whole, well, you go from there.
Yeah, I think someone with 1 to 2 years experience doing development of some kind, you'd probably see maybe a month or two. Maybe, varies based on their skill. But SDK is a little bit involved. The idea of activities and fragments and views and doing all that correctly is probably one of the hardest parts of Android. Whereas like doing database operations and using cursors and things like that, that's actually fairly straightforward. But getting all your view stacks set up and making sure that you don't create unlimited activities going to new screens is somewhat important to just understand. Even if the OS handles it for you, you need to know that, like, oh, I can't have like 6 fragments on this one screen. Like, that's just bad UX. So it's kind of, I would say minimum 2 weeks if you're like a superstar developer, and then like on the like not so great developer, probably a month or 2, 6 to 8 weeks. So average about.
Okay. You guys say, okay, first off, you have a rebuttal on Android.
Well, I mean, I was going to ask, like, what do you think about for a very polished, like, Android developer who isn't going to put 6 activities on the screen and knows what 12 libraries to pull in, that are, like, the new hotness that you're going to want to be using? Like, how long does that take?
How long does that take to, like create?
To get to a level of, like, Android developer where you can say, like, you're putting out very polished, like,
Proficiency.
To get to that point?
Like, not just, like, shipping your first app, but, like, really, like, putting out a good piece.
Yeah. It probably depends very highly on motivation, obviously. Like, if you're being paid to learn to do that, then that will obviously change. I'd say probably 6 months to a year to like really understand what you're doing and make a really good app out of it.
Okay, how about you guys? How about iOS?
I mean, I'd say that that's the big difference there. Android's such an open box that it's you have to know a lot of extra things beyond what Google's really given you to build a really nice Android app. With iOS, Apple gives you basically the pieces you need, and if you kind of follow their guidance or read the books that they put out, or try out any of the courses online, I think you can get to proficiency a lot faster than you could on Android.
There's definitely a quote-unquote Apple way of doing things. This ties in with the culture aspect that I was getting at earlier.
But yeah, I think for putting out your first iOS app, what do you think? Like a couple weeks? Like you could throw something together pretty quickly. I think proficiency probably quicker than Android, just in my opinion. Just because you're not having to reach outside of Apple's ecosystem to get a lot of these pieces that really make developing the code base a good thing.
Yeah, I'd say you could get up to speed, up and running in under a month. And proficiency where you feel comfortable with a pretty nicely polished app. Definitely no more than 6 months if you're a competent person, for sure.
And I'll interject and say that we've done beginner code labs for both platforms in this user group. And anybody that's interested can go to, I think it's apple.com/developer or google.com/developer. And then the second one may not be right.
Developer.com.
And okay, and there are programs that will get you running and have you able to publish an app inside of 2 days. You know, if you're really on it. You have a rebuttal to anything they said?
Not particularly. I mean, I do agree that there's a lot more to Android than just Google gives you, and it's really just a different ideology between the two companies as far as like the Apple way or something that you mentioned. They are very much like you should do this, and then you should do this, and then you should do this. Whereas Google's like, these are some list of things you could do. You know. Maybe use it, maybe don't. And they just don't care. Like they give you the very loose guidelines, and as far as like experienced developers do, that's okay. But for someone just getting started, that can be really daunting. I mean, even on places on Google's site, it even says that they refer to Stack Overflow. That's a nightmare most of the time. I mean, I asked and answered 100 questions 3 weeks later. So it's and that question is like closing on getting close to 2 years old now, and it keeps getting upvotes, which means it's the same people asking the same questions, just like very slowly. Like, well, that's not the answer. So it's kind of weird that there's all of this compatibility and like Wiley said, it's just an open box. Whereas Apple, you open the box and there's what you're supposed to do. So Google's just like, well, have fun, you do what you can. So yeah, I think that's a pretty apt description.
Okay.
I can give like a real world example too. Like at my last job, we were working on a project where we had an Android team and an iOS team, and we were both trying to build the same feature. And it had to do with localization. I forget, it was temperature functionality, like being able to switch from Fahrenheit to Celsius. And Apple's Foundation library is pretty extensive with the type of tool sets that it gives, because Apple does like to maintain a lot of control and give developers just everything so that they don't have to do anything their own. They try to give them everything they need. So it was a super quick like toggle and checking a user preference to see if the user was in a local a region that used Fahrenheit or Celsius, and if the user preferred one or the other. And that technology in that specific instance doesn't exist on Android. Like there was no standard library that Google vended to the developer to use. And there are a lot of cases like that where Foundation specifically offers a lot of functionality for free that you would have to go and search for or pull in from like a third party for Android development. So it's kind of a la carte versus included type of thing.
Okay, well, while you're ruffling feathers, we have the next question is going to be for you guys. I imagine there's probably something you guys, that you as an iOS developer absolutely hate about Android. And maybe it's not you, maybe it's Wiley, but one of you guys is going to have something good to say here.
Something bad.
Something bad. I will say this, and this is purely stylistic, but my least favorite thing to come out of Android is the stupid hamburger button. I've not been a fan of it. It seems like it permeates so many iOS apps, and even several that I've worked on. And that's
basically what the hamburger button is for you.
Oh yeah, so the hamburger button is like, it was big in Facebook for a long time, but like usually in the upper left corner, there's that square that has a stack of 3 horizontal lines, and you press it and the drawer slides out. But that whole drawer methodology, I've never been a huge fan of.
It's just not really intuitive.
Yeah, exactly. It's not intuitive. It feels like you don't know where to put this thing, so let's just throw it in the drawer. And again, that's purely stylistic. It may be a little nitpicky, but that's the one thing that I'm not a fan of. That just comes to mind. Normally, I'm a pretty understanding person. Everybody has their own choices. everybody, people are allowed to be wrong. But
Android just admitted it by putting forth their tower.
oh yes, yes, this is my favorite admission of fault here.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
I don't know. Can we get 2 hates? Is that fine? This is
You
a quick
can do a
chat.
second hater.
I gotta say, security out of the box is my biggest thing. I know, and it seems odd to me because, there's one version of iOS that 80% of people are using. And you would think that there would be a ton of security vulnerabilities that are coming out and attacking that hardware. But, while Android gives you great power, with that comes great responsibility, right? I mean, just the number of phones out there that were affected by stage fright, and probably the number of phones that are hacked that people don't even know are hacked is kind of appalling to me. I like my end-to-end encrypted iMessage.
Yep.
So that's probably the biggest thing for me is just security out of the box is not great. And the odds of you getting an update also not great. So yeah, that would be my thing.
Now over to you, Sean.
Mike here. So the thing that I hate about iOS, this is specific to developers. What is the deal with provisioning? Like, oh my gosh.
No argument from this side.
So I have very limited experience with iOS, and most of it has been Xcode built. And it's just like, we can't find your what are you doing? Who are you? And it's just, it takes hours.
The provisioning filter.
Yes,
It's rough. But no one downloaded a malicious copy of Pokemon Go, right? Just saying. That's its purpose.
Yeah, so as a rebuttal to your hate, screw Samsung. Just screw them, because, if they would provide us updates, maybe that wouldn't be such a big deal. That is a problem, and Google's working very hard to convince manufacturers that it should be their problem. Provisioning on iOS is just a nightmare. That's the one thing that I don't like most.
I would reiterate it maybe a little simpler way. I think the barrier of entry for developers on iOS, just because of that publishing, app publishing, which I've done on multiple platforms, it seems to me like obviously there's different tastes for everybody. It seems to me it's a lot harder, or at least a good deal harder to publish to the Apple Store than it is to the Google Play. I've gone all the way from test flight into production, and it just seems like maybe because it's the way I think that the Google Play Store was for dummies.
Sure.
I think less very good.
And we'll have to say with provisioning, if you haven't tried out Xcode 8, it's almost fixed. It's a lot better. It really is. I published an app to test flight the other day without ever getting into the Apple developer portal for that company. And their credentials, I plugged them into Xcode, it generated the right provisioning profiles for me, uploaded, I was done. So it's definitely gotten better. It's something that they're working on, but
It helps a lot if you already know what you're doing.
it does.
Yeah.
But literally, if I didn't and I just hit the fix button, it worked.
Yeah,
I'll tell you from experience, going back to getting up to speed, that's one of the things that new developers have the hardest time wrapping their heads around. I've spent countless hours explaining to junior devs, these are the pieces that you need in the order that they go in for provisioning to work, and it's mind-bending.
Yeah, and it still isn't. It's like you do that, you do the exact steps that you're told, and it still doesn't work.
Yeah, sometimes I'm like, did I do that right?
Yeah.
Am I crazy?
Android provisioning can get tricky though, right? If you lose your your key store.
Right. So it doesn't get tricky until your app is on the store.
Yeah.
And then you need to make sure that you don't wipe your hard drive, because if you do, it's due out of time.
Okay, well, we might have already addressed this because we're kind of talking about it now, but what would you say, and we're going to go to Sean first, what are the gotchas? What are the hard parts, the hardest parts to get you started?
Yeah.
Going for Android?
So that's one of the big things, actually. So instead of provisioning, Android has a thing called code sign-up, where at the end of your your development, you said, okay, I'm ready to publish this. You have to generate a key store. And then with your key store, you sign your APK. That basically says to the world, like, this is who I am. I certify that this file is legitimate. And then you put that file on the Play Store, and it has to match. Like, the Play Store accepts that signing. And then every day from then until the end of time, you have to use that same signature.
You're never going to use another certificate for the same APK.
Correct. Which means if you generate a key store and you save it locally to your computer, and you're a naughty developer and don't back it up to the cloud anymore, everyone, back up your stuff.
At the very least, email to yourself.
Back up your stuff, because if your hard drive fails and you lose that key store, everything you publish with that key store, you can no longer touch. You have to create an entirely new listing in your Play Store. That means losing however many downloaded users you have, like, they're gone, because you have to create an entirely new thing. Now, one thing that I've seen other companies do, I don't know if it's a Play Store problem or just separate reasons, but Spotify and Twitch are both doing this with their apps. They published a new thing, and then in the current app, they have some sort of toggle that says, "Hey, we're updating this other thing now," and then you click the button in the app, and it takes you to Play Store to download the new thing. But you have to have the foresight to do that in the first place. Otherwise, you still.
Yeah, foresight is king. It's always great to include hooks like that in your app, just in case. But you really got to be thinking down the road.
Right. So that's one of the big things, and it's probably the biggest thing as far as development is concerned. So,
Gotchas for the rough parts.
Can you start this one? I think the trickiest thing with Apple is knowing where they're going next. So, Apple has a certain way of doing things, but they're also very secretive. So they're, all the way of doing things today looks great. Like, you don't know necessarily why you're doing things that way until hardware gets announced a year or two from now. Let's take auto, for example, right? Like, a lot of people used to write their stuff out in code. Some people still do. Like stuff like that.
A lot of people used to manually lay out their frames and stuff.
There you go.
Using the coordinate system.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave us this tool, auto layout. And it's like, oh, that's cool. And it was a real pain in the rear to use for like a long time. But those of us who saw that, hey, maybe if Apple's pushing this hard, like, maybe it's really important, and switch their apps to that, and having trouble when, we went from only having a 640 by 320 screen to now having the 4-inch iPhone and everything that's come after that. So I think, like, reading between the lines of, like, what is Apple doing with this? Why is this important? Bitcode's a good one right now, right? We're
still
should we
speculating
do
on that one.
Bitcode? Should we not do Bitcode? Like, it takes longer to upload all my builds, but surely there's a point to this at some point, and so you do Bitcode, hoping that eventually it pays off for you, but you don't always know. So,
and that's the tricky thing is, like, if you buy into stuff like that, when Apple finally does unveil these wonderful new things, a lot of times you get the functionality for free. But you have to kind of be bought into that idea of trusting them a little bit, which is.
So it's tricky. It's tricky to balance that of, like, do I switch over to a new paradigm of laying out views, or do I do it the way that I know how to do it, that I can, efficiently get through something?
And I would say one of the other gotchas, and this goes back to kind of how Apple is keen on controlling everything and giving you all the tools that you need to build an app for their platform. A lot of times, one of the gotchas is, you got a young developer, they'll come in and they'll want to build everything from scratch because they like writing code, where a lot of times half the things you want to do are already done for you, or there's a specific way to do it. And on top of that, going to, like, the user experience stuff, Apple provides this really excellent document called the HIG, the Human Interface Guidelines. And one of the big gotchas is people don't follow that a lot of times, and it gets them rejected from app review. And sometimes it's pretty obvious why you were rejected from app review.
Sometimes it's pixel off.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes it's a little nebulous, and Apple gives you, like, a pretty bland thing. But if you had followed the HIG and kind of bought into it, you'd have been fine. So.
Okay. Now here we got the lightning round, and let's see if we had any answers submitted for, okay, we've got 11 responses, so that's good. Okay, no peeking, no peeking, no peeking, no peeking.
I mean, it's on the screen. It's on the screen.
You cannot peek.
All right.
Okay, Coke or Pepsi? Coke or Pepsi?
Coke.
Pepsi.
Wrong. Okay.
Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Wars.
Star Wars.
Okay, well, you're in the majority there. Good. Okay, Ford or Chevy?
Tesla.
Ford?
Honda.
Ford or Chevy? It's gotta be Ford or Chevy.
Ford.
If we had to pick.
Yeah, Ford.
You guys are all wrong. You're wrong. It's Chevy. See, look. Survey says.
We were told not to look.
Okay, if you're fighting off ninjas, you're surrounded by ninjas. You're laying on the ground. You have on your left hand you have a nunchuck, and on your right hand you have a shuriken. Which do you grab?
Fighting what?
Ninjas.
Ninjas.
Shuriken.
Yeah.
Shuriken.
Shuriken. So you're gonna throw.
Yeah.
Oh,
You're wrong. Nunchucks.
That's fair.
Nunchucks. Okay. Tabs or spaces?
Spaces.
Yes.
Oh,
Spaces. Seriously?
The default next goes
disagree with the team.
What's wrong with you?
Okay, well,
That's the next cage match right there.
Oh,
The majority of our attendees said tabs.
Yes.
why would you do that?
Because, and actually, this is a real world answer. I worked with a guy who he saved like a meg of memory by replacing all his spaces.
Guys, do you know how big hard drives are? Do you know how big hard drives are?
This is 15 years ago. So, next. In a bizarre email grooming incident, both the four reported candidates were killed. You have to vote for one of the three main independent candidates, which are Jerry Johnson, Austin Peterson, or John McAfee, and yes, that John McAfee.
Wait, where's Jill Stein?
Libertarian?
You have three choices. Fine. Gary Johnson, Austin Peterson, John McAfee.
Abstain.
Yeah, decline to comment.
It's rigged anyway, right?
You're all wrong. It's John McAfee.
I write in myself. That's what I do.
He only had one. There's only one murder. Okay. Okay. What's your position on the Oxford Common?
Yes.
That's the correct answer. What the hell is the Oxford Common? And Ed, you might have
Not the extra comma, it's the necessary comma.
Yeah, it's like, you know, like Coke, Pepsi, and the other guys.
Fago. Oh yeah, nobody answered Fago. Yeah.
Oh, Fago.
Fago was an answer, if I did said it, but I didn't. Coke, Pepsi, or Fago. Does anybody have Fago?
I have never even heard of it until today.
Once, maybe?
Yeah. We're a Fago fan. Has anybody ever been to what is it? What's it? Insane Animal Crossing concert? No.
No.
You do. I'm guessing you've been to the Okay, so back to the questions. I think we're at iOS as the first responders. What do you see as your platforms as an iPhone or iPad's ideal use case?
I think if you're going to write like the first version of your app, you should do it on iOS, like most people do. No, I don't know. It's
just for like real world usage. Like if you were buying an iPhone, like what would you be buying it for?
Yeah. Like when they most what? When people are running an app on, what do you think is the most commonly run app? Let's put it that way. Maybe it's Facebook.
It's iMessage. Yeah, like we know like the most used app on the iPhone is iMessage, but that's kind of a cop out because it's a text messaging app.
Yeah, messaging. I guess beyond messaging, beyond just.
That'd probably be the same answer for Android, but whatever your 1,000 messaging apps.
Well, I was going to say that's actually kind of valid because there's so many choices on Android.
Yeah.
There's
Duo, of course.
Yeah.
No, I've never used Duo.
I mean, outside of communication, which I guess technically discounts Facebook too, but I don't know. I feel like there's a big push right now to get iPads specifically into like professional markets. So I know that there are, especially in Nashville with the healthcare industry, there are lots of applications being built for doctors and nurses and people who maybe don't need like super intensive data entry, but need access to a lot of data to read just to do their job well. So that type of market, I think, is growing more and more, especially I think for iPhones and iPads because of all the things we've talked about tonight.
I think it's actually an ideal use case for one of these things. But
Yeah, but that went nowhere. But I think like that. So like in the professional world or like enterprise level type stuff, getting data at a glance is a perfect use case for iPhones or iPads. So yeah.
Yeah, I think enterprise deployment is big too. Like, since BlackBerry left, there's not really a easy to configure enterprise solution. I feel like iOS fits that mold pretty well.
Yeah.
And I'd say another big thing, like, that iOS I think does particularly well is if you're building any sort of hardware software integration with a consumer product.
Yeah.
iPhone all the way.
and could you clarify what you mean by?
Sure. So anything that uses Bluetooth Low Energy, or if you've got some fancy thing that controls a remote control car through a headphone jack.
Or even plugs into the lightning port if you're willing to pay royalties.
Yeah.
I feel like, I agree.
I feel like that consumer market, like
Man, I had the funniest experience the other day. I was at an alumni event and somebody pulled out a Square reader and they were trying to go take money for like t-shirts and stuff. And the girl realized, oh wait, I just got the new iPhone and I can't use my Square reader to take payments. And I lost it. It was hilarious. It was the first time because I've been like, oh, it's not going to be a big deal about having a headphone jack. And then there it is right in front of me. I witnessed it firsthand.
But you can still use it with the adapter, right?
Yeah, you can. And I think Square actually has Yeah, I think, like I said, we both have experience. We actually both worked for Griffin Technology here in town doing hardware software integration. I think it's a really great platform for that, which is directly because there's only a handful of devices and a handful of 2 ports.
And they have to be Apple approved.
Yeah, exactly. And that goes into like the security aspect and stuff like that, which I just read an article earlier today, people were about a year ago complaining about HomeKit and all that stuff and its stringent security requirements and all the IP cameras that aren't HomeKit compatible that were hacked and used to DDoS half of the world. That's not looking so bad right now.
Ideal use case.
Yeah, so
I don't know that there is like a typical use case for Android. The thing that comes to mind is like things like the NVIDIA Shield TV box. It's Android does not necessarily have a phone or a tablet. So Chrome OS runs Android apps. So that's one thing. You want to develop for something other than just a handset. Android is definitely the way to go. I mean, that said, iPad is definitely, like, if you want a tablet, and you just want a tablet, you don't care about the OS or anything, iPad probably has Android boot, because Android tablets are kind of, at best. But as far as, like, typical Android stuff, the games are really the first thing that comes to mind. NVIDIA is doing really good work with their stuff. The Nexus Player is really cool. The Chromecast is awesome. It's those other things that aren't necessarily the phone. When it comes to like apps and stuff, we've got widgets, guys. We've got widgets and home screen wallpapers. Think about it. It's brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, there's
the iPad
Pro. iPad Pro.
Yeah, Specifically to that notion, that is less an Android thing and more of the manufacturers that are making hardware. But yeah, they have the capability to do it. So yeah, I think that's. I mean, I don't know. It's weird to think of just an Android user as like this specific type of thing. I think that's kind of the point of Android is anyone can use it. You can do whatever you want to with it.
Okay. Well then, let's go back to the audience submitted questions. We've got a few minutes to cover those. I guess. Well, whoever's here to pose this question could pose it directly. But I'll say for Android, what's the best phone do you think?
I don't know. I was really fond of the Nexus line because it was stock Android, and you get consistent updates directly from Google. I have a near 3-year-old phone now, so I don't know about the good new one. The Pixels looks really promising. I'm not a huge fan of some of the hardware choices they made, but you know, everyone else seems to be okay with it. It's selling okay.
It's supposed to be the best camera ever on any phone, is what they say about it.
Sure. Yeah. I think I actually like as big of a deal as people make about camera on phones. I think I actually have a camera app on it. So that's not really even something I pay attention to, honestly. But yeah, here Note 7, Note 7. That's what you want. If you want a discount on the Galaxy S8 or Note 8, buy a size 7 does exclusive, and then you get half off the new thing.
I don't think you can even buy it anymore. That's
Took it off the shelf completely. In general, Samsung has really good hardware. The software they put on top of it is I'm not a huge fan of. A lot of people will use them, so they must be okay. But I personally think Pixels and HTC phones, the M10, I think is their like HTC's main line. That one was pretty good too.
It's a pretty easy choice for us.
Yeah.
Just once.
But headphones.
Yeah.
6 or 6P.
It's the 7 and the 7, or the 7 and 7 Plus. Yeah. I mean, all intents and purposes, they're identical with the exception of screen size. The big difference between the big one and the small one is the camera. The Plus model has a pretty novel camera. It's got 2 lenses, and one's like a telephoto, and one's a regular wide-angle lens.
I didn't know that.
And they do some pretty cool stuff. Like they've got this new feature out that's all software-based, where you can essentially take up its portrait mode, and it will do like the bokeh effect of like a portrait where your foreground, the person is in perfect focus. That's what I was looking for. And then behind it, everything's blurred out, kind of faking that lens bokeh effect. So yeah, if you're into cool camera stuff, get the bigger one. Otherwise, your preference.
On that point, the 7 Plus actually has optical zoom, doesn't it?
Both have that now.
Oh, both of them have it.
Yeah. That's the big difference, because in the 6S and S Plus, only the Plus, the bigger one, had the image stabilization, but both have it now.
Gotcha.
On the 7.
Okay. Xamarin, yes or no?
No.
I hear it's kind of nice.
And for one code base,
That's what the that's what
one code base deploy anyway. You know, that's perfect.
Well, I think the big ones that I have. I've never touched it. It is all second-hand knowledge. But from what I understand, there is the centralized code base, but you still have to do a lot of individual platform stuff for the UI-specific things, and that's quite a barrier. So
That's most apps.
yeah,
Like there's not a lot of business logic in your app unless you're doing it wrong or have a really
most apps these days are very like client-server based. So
just a thin face on top
Exactly,
of
yeah.
logic that's sitting somewhere else.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, if you're gonna do most of your work on the UI, you might as well do it the native way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, first-party way. I know the Xamarin guys will take umbrage with not saying.
Well, they're not here. How much of the pain comes from the different How much of a pain comes from the different form factors target? And I don't 100% understand that. Whoever asked that question.
I'll let you handle this one first.
Okay. Yeah. So Android, I think, is actually pretty nice as far as form factor goes. If you want to do different layouts based on form factor, that's something else entirely, because you basically have to design 2 different screens at that point. You don't really have the nice model layout that Riley mentioned, that you just say like this goes here and then this goes here, and it just kind of does it for you. If you do just one layout and it's for mobile, it'll look good on your and then tablet, it'll look the same, which is just big. So if you want like specifically tablet, you basically have to like do an entire other screen and set out the layouts properly. But if you don't care, if it's just the one layout and you just need to get those 4 buttons to your users, I mean, it's pretty easy. Like Android does all the scaling for you. You tell it how much in density pixels you want, so that it does the scaling properly, and you're pretty much done.
Yeah, density is a nice feature. Who would win in a literal occasion game? This is a great question. Tim Cook or
We don't get to answer that question. Okay.
Tim Cook, Sundar Pichai.
Tim Cook's older,
Tim Cook's
so
pretty scrappy. I would go with Tim Cook.
I don't know.
Yeah, Sundar's let's see.
Google's gonna let flag this search.
So there's Sundar. I was hoping to put them side by side.
There you go.
So there's Tim Cook and Zuckerberg. The match 53 of these guys. I know he was an amazing champion.
I think just for loyalty's sake, I have to say
Sundar.
Tim Cook looks like he has better muscle.
Think he's got pecs under there?
He's wearing the Apple Watch.
It seems like he's got much more dense muscle mass. So he could probably, they got him down.
Yeah.
He could probably put it.
Sundar might have some flappy arms. You can't really tell. Okay. Let me see. A couple of minutes.
Would it be okay if we answered the question about laying out for different devices?
Yes.
Skipped us.
Well, see, you only got one device. What are you talking about? Go ahead.
In the iOS world, we really care about user experience and across all devices, whether it be an iPhone, tablet, or different sizes and stuff like that.
Whereas they don't.
No, not at all. There are a lot of really great technologies like auto layout and size classes, which make and storyboards, which make creating really nice, beautiful, dynamically sizable layouts, and only having to do it once and not like multiple times, make it really, really easy, especially for people. Getting them up to speed really quickly.
Yeah. iOS also has like intrinsic content sizes for its UI elements, and since we're mainly using stock UI elements, like they are going to size right on tablet. They're not just going to be scaled up to some ridiculous button size.
Yep.
We built several apps recently using auto layout, and we're not meant for iPad. And the client said, "Hey, what about an iPad version?" And we say, "Switch universal, build, run." Looks great.
You really worked that well.
Yeah, I've been really surprised, but like. You just basically get it for free. The toolbars and everything resizes.
Bigger font and everything?
No, not bigger font.
But there are tools like with the size classes and stuff like that. Like you have your giant storyboard, which is a graphical representation of your app, and it's kind of square instead of shaped like a phone or an iPad. And you can go into different modes, which is like, this is what it looks like on a 4S and a 5S and a 6 and a 7 and an iPad, and you can kind of make device-specific adjustments or size class-specific adjustments from that one file. Instead of having to, like in the past, years ago, when you wanted to do an iPad and iPhone app, you had to basically build twice. Like you do on Android, you don't have to do that anymore. You get one storyboard with one main layout, and then you can tweak it based on the screen size, which is pretty nice.
Okay. This question was asked differently, but for both platforms, would iOS guys admit any downsides to your platform? It sounds like you don't.
In a cage match situation?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like
Yeah,
we're
it's
going
So, well, but it's actually it's posed to the Android as well. So, well, I think it's a decent question.
Yeah, no, it's fair.
Like it's just like you go into a job interview and they ask you what your biggest weakness is. So, what is your biggest weakness?
Well, we talked about it earlier, and we all agree code signing on iOS sucks. It makes it nerve-wracking and stressful. And it honestly, I know one of Apple's biggest complaints is that they lock things down, and it's frustrating for us as well. Like there are things that Android developers do that are super easy and great on their platform, and it flies in the store. But you can't do that on iOS, and it's frustrating, especially when you're on a team where there's an Android team and an iOS team, and you're trying to get to the same end goal. But there are things that just make it super burdensome for the iOS side. My last job, it seems like we were always like 2 weeks behind the Android team on certain things. But yeah, it can be a little burdensome sometimes.
Okay. Anything else you want to add on that?
I mean, I'll say the same. Like, there are certain things you can do on iOS that are really easy, and there are certain things that you can do on Android that are easy. One of the things that, my job, we've got an Android team and an iOS team, and the customer came to us and they're like, "Hey, so we need to do the lock screen stuff." And Android was like, "Okay, yeah." And iOS was like, "Oh, you're doing what? You're doing what?" So, like, it's simple things like that it's similar to iOS. You don't have any problems having to design layouts if you want it on two different form factors. That's one of the big ones. If your design is not created in such a way that it has Android in mind, that can really hinder you. So you have to have a UI team, UX team that is willing to do their red lines with DB. Because if they just give you like pixels or percentages, it just doesn't match up. So you kind of have to know from the front end, hey, this is going to be on Android at some point. We need to include those numbers in there. And if you don't have that, it gets pretty hairy trying to lay out everything to fit exactly what the designers are trying to see in their head.
Okay, we're approaching our deadline of time, so I'm going to the last question. And it's basically, I'm going to leave it open to whoever wants to answer. It doesn't have to be per team. What's next? What do we not need to see from your platform that we'll be seeing soon, or mobile in general? And whoever wants to answer this first, go ahead. Take it.
I've got a pipe dream about bitcode. I'm waiting for iOS and macOS to converge. I think that it's eventually going to happen as soon as they can wean themselves off of Intel, and we'll see if it happens this week. I mean, who knows?
Oh, that could be that really.
That could be why we didn't get a new MacBook before. But yeah, I think there's going to be some type of convergence there once Apple figures out how to do it. Everyone else has kind of done it, and Apple usually ends up doing what everyone else does eventually, but they sit back and wait and see like what actually works and what doesn't work. For me, that's.
I actually have the same thing. Android on Chromebooks is what I'm looking forward to. You don't have to worry about it. I think with multi-window coming to both platforms, here for Android, you guys have one, right?
Yeah, on iPad.
Specific devices?
iPads, yeah.
With multi-window on both of those, like, they're ready for desktop. Like, as soon as developers update that to be, I'm going to move the window around wherever I want, they've done their desktop already. So I think that'll be interesting to see apps that were previously designed for mobile actually coming to desktop, and have a whole other dynamic to think about when you're developing your apps.
The only pipe dream that I would add is I'm a big fan of Swift, Apple's new development language, and it's been really cool to see it go open source and kind of the development community really adopt it and start porting it to other platforms. Like you can actually run Swift on Windows and Raspberry Pis and Linux and now even Android. I think it would be really cool if somehow, some way we could all come together and adopt Swift as like the primary development language. That would make, you know, having cross-platform libraries and core business logic that you could share between your iOS and Android phones, that would be really, really cool. And we could avoid Xamarin.
Are you using Swift right now?
Yep.
I mean, in production.
Yeah.
Okay, Ed had a good question, and this is not for the panel, this is for our audience. iPhone users. Wow, Android users? Many more of you guys, right? Many more of the, what you're,
No, David, have your pocket right now.
yeah, shoot. BlackBerry, Windows Phone, anybody? Windows Phone, of course.
So, from a developer perspective, John Morgan and Scale, perspective, what will be the better project?
I can't lose there.
That one's,
I think that's a win-win.
whichever one you want. I think like from a business doing sales, iOS typically comes first, and then but assuming that whatever your customer puts out is completely flop, they're likely to come back to the Android app as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
If you're going to be a freelancer, though, since iOS does come first, like that's not a bad thing. Not a bad position to be in.
So not surprisingly, the iOS guys say iOS.
As far as pay, is it equal?
What do you think?
So much money.
I think Zach might have some better insight into this than any of us.
Might be making the amount of less than a local developer who's really strong on It's actually pretty good.
What about iOS when it's Android?
iOS and Android, they're about the same. However, I've seen some freelance Android developers that they're doing more than iOS. So I've come across those guys, they're doing it ever since Android is the platform to develop on, and they've been able to get it with the companies that develop applications around that.
Which one you have higher that is technical?
You know what? Right now, I would say that Android is the tough one to fill. I don't know why that's exactly, but I think it's just that a lot of Android developers now have found the place where they're pretty happy. And I've seen iOS developers so can't really do too much of that. Yeah.
Okay, anything else before we wrap up? All right, then we'll wrap on.
What can I say about the rumors of these thousands of people who said that every time I'm not holding the mic from it's touching the buttons.
What?
What?
You've heard that all these women have come forward saying that every time I'm not holding the mic, it's touching the buttons.
Yeah.
You haven't never seen anyone walk. I'm not just women.
Nope.
And all of them with these accounts. No, yeah, I'm on YouTube.
Okay. Sorry, I had your picture. No.
Okay. I have seen people walking around with phones in their back.
Okay. Now, I think the grab sign up, the names in here, is anybody's the name not in here that wants to be? Going once. Justin, would you please? click the mouse.
I've been winning all kinds of
I know, right?
Oh yeah, and the prize here. Wait, the prize here is.
Is that the Note 7 cardboard box?
Prize here is a pen.
yeah.
You get a pen. One headphone. And you'll never find anyone like it outside the room without looking like Okay, and next one, if you're not familiar with Pluralsight, what they are is a online tutorial company. They give people they give you the opportunity to learn things like Android coding or iOS coding or how to be a BA in 2 weeks or less. And if you have an extra revenue, you'll get this to Pluralsight. And also, if you're unemployed, come talk to me and you can do this for free. It's just the way they operate. So, spin again, or Joseph, spin again since you're the winner. Just a click. Yeah. Or right there. No. There we go. That person. All right, next one is a Google Cardboard. This is the poor man's version of a virtual reality viewer, and it fits 3.5 to 6 inch phones, I think, if I remember right.
It's like exactly like Oculus, right?
It is. This is Oculus is a ripoff of this, frankly. Oculus Thrift, yes. We didn't make that up. That already exists. Okay. Rick, no, Guy. Now you do. Hey, we're done. If here, what? Oh, this. Nothing good. It was all stuff. We got one guy to get to the other side. If you would like to submit your feedback, one of our sponsors, Google, wants to know who's coming to our meetings. We'll let them know. There's go to that URL. Otherwise, if you've ever written that based on anything that we talked about here, specifically like we influenced you to do iOS development or Android development, let us know, and then that'll help us to improve our content in an ongoing way. And again, thanks to our sponsors, BMI, Pluralsight, Google, and Texas.
Yeah.
And also, I forgot to mention the other. We did have one other sponsor tonight. Our other sponsor tonight was Core Rights. They paid for these things for you guys.
That is one thing. Apple does have.